I don't really know what this talk is going to look like exactly. I have like some ideas and directions, and my lovely panelists are going to pull my ass out of the fire like always. So we represent a bunch of different indie game communities for like advocates for players, advocates for developers, both digital and tabletop games. Philadelphia is a really great city because we're one of the biggest cities to not have a AAA game development studio in it. So we're all homegrown, bootstrap, just, you know, I think the word scrappy gets thrown around anytime you mention us. So let me scroll down on my PDF. So my name is Steve Pettit. I am a professional game developer, finally. I work for a company called PHL Collective right now. We have a game called Clusterpuck 99 that's coming out on the Switch in a couple of weeks. We do a lot of cool client work.
It's a lot of fun.
I do motion capture at Drexel University, which you can buy on the Unity Asset Store. I'm working on a rhythm game that's not very good. If you go down to MIVS, Philly Game Mechanics, which is one of the organizations in Philadelphia, has an arcade cabinet called the Phillytron, which is featuring like a whopping like 10 indie games from Philly that you can go play. Some people in this room made those games, like these two. I'm also a professional wrestler. So Nicole Klein was going to be here, but I think she's in a Dunkin' Donuts in Delaware right now. But she's really rad. But this also highlights a lot of the other groups in Philly, like the Game Makers Guild. She's run events like Game Loop, which is an unconference where people just show up and decide what the conference is going to be about on the spot. She makes really rad tabletop games. And I'm just going to have people who I don't have on this start to present themselves. So I don't have a slide prepared for you two, so go for it.
Hello. I don't know if this is working. Hi, I'm Karen McKenna. I am an indie developer in the Philadelphia area. I've been making indie games for, 10, 11 years now. I've done some DS stuff, some PC mobile. And I'm also currently on the intern board of the Philadelphia IGDA. We're having our elections next week. I don't know what else to say about myself.
I'm Adrian Sandoval. My background is very similar because I came from Island Officials, the same company that Karen did. Formerly a game designer there, but I also am also currently working with the IGDA as not on the board, but I'm currently our community outreach manager. So I think about gaming communities quite a bit. I also I founded the Game Design Guild, which is Camden County College's game design club, which I founded that back in 2006, 2007, and it's still going strong today, and I'm very happy and proud about that. But yeah, currently I've aside from the work I do with IGDA and helping out with game mechanics where I can, I also lost my train of thought, so I'm going to pass it on to Alex.
Alex has a slide. But he can also introduce himself. This is Alex.
Oh, hey. So my name's Alex Gilbert. I am the head of Red Queen Gaming, which is a content creation platform for players to create awesome web apps for the video games that they love to play. So, if you like Hastelude, which is an awesome Philly-based game that's showing down in MIVS, they're integrated with the Red Queen platform, so we get their data and we can create awesome tools like post-match analysis and leaderboards and stat trackers and stuff like that. Also, refounding chair of the IGDA in Philly, which we're getting off the ground, and these two are going to continue to make it awesome. Yeah, so that's me.
And then I made one for Jake because I didn't know if Sean or Jake were going to be here. So you actually got one.
Game Jam, nice. Hey, I'm Jake O'Brien. I am a co-owner and founder of Flyclops, which is a game studio in Philly. And I'm also involved in game mechanics. And I've been involved in historical organizations throughout Philly, from the Philly Unity Group to previous incarnation of IGDA through the years. And my main contribution, I think, to game mechanics is running the game jams. We're a very avid, aggressive game jam group. We do a game jam every month. It's a little different. It's not a weekend one. It's like a looser 2-week format. But we've been doing that for a few years. I've been running it for a couple of years. And just as far as community development, I think that's been that's part of what makes Philly a little bit unique. So I'll be talking about that game jam stuff a little more, but that's me.
Cool. And then our last panelist who couldn't be here, was Sean Pierre, who is kind of like the godfather of the Philly game scene right now. That's him with the guitar looking very sensually at the camera. He's a really good dude. Unfortunately, he got stuck in the snow and couldn't make it out, but he's kind of like responsible for like why a lot of us are here and still here. You can hit him up on Twitter at Sean Pierre. He's always like super stoked to talk about this kind of stuff and really wants to learn about other cities as well, which we might ask, rather than do a QA with the audience, we might ask you people what stuff is. Okay. So now to make up what happens next, because that's as far as I thought. No, so my experience with the Philly indie game community was Philly Game Mechanics, which is like a weekly meetup where we do a whole number of things. It used to be called Philly Dev Night, and we had a whole co-working office for making games. And I had like a really, really traumatic, rough senior year of college and kind of like bombed out of every friendship circle I had. And then just started going to more meetings at Dev Night and Game Mechanics and slowly developed like a lot of skills and new friendships, and not just like game development skills, but like the ability to talk to strangers. And that's led me into so many very weird paths, such as professional wrestling. And I think it's like really, really important to develop these like open, welcoming communities, you know, create safe spaces and stuff, because it worked such wonders for me, which is why I want to like get the information about how we formed them out and kind of explore that topic, because it's like really sappy, but like indie game development community saved my life. And I guess what I wanted to start on, because I know it's a good topic, is the game jams run by Philly Game Mechanics, which is like when I go out to other states and meet people, that's really the one thing people know about Philly, is that thanks to Jake and his pal Corey, we do a game jam literally every month, and we've done a game jam literally every month for 5 years. So Jake, if you want to understand or talk about and help these people understand why we're insane and why we do this.
Sure, yeah. So I don't know exactly. So Philly Game Mechanics has its roots. It's always been a very organic organization. It's very. It's never, until recently, there wasn't a whole lot of intention behind how it kind of came together, which had its strengths and its weaknesses. And recently, just because of having to grow up, we've had to be a little more intentional. But I think it still has a lot of its kind of organic, kind of grassroots, just user-driven identity. And I think. So back in the early days, when Dev Night, as it was then called, was just a weekly gathering of people who would, you know, maybe 5 to 10 people who would get together in a room and just work together on stuff near each other for companionship, kind of like a co-working situation. And it was at night, so it would accommodate like extracurriculars, and it started growing to a couple dozen. And at some point, this game jam tradition started, and it would just be anybody throws out a theme. And anybody wanted to just jump in. And I think it started as a 12-hour jam, because this was kind of in the part of Dev Night where it started to be like into the wee hours kind of a affair. And so it would start like 5 and go till 5 in the morning. And Dev Night doesn't go till 5 in the morning anymore, but it did for a while. And to kind of accommodate people's schedules and to be a little, to allow the frequency of jamming, which has a lot of benefits, which I'll get into in a minute, but to not destroy people's schedules and lives, it was adopted to do a more casual format. Most game jams, actually, how many people are familiar with game jams here? I should ask that. Okay, so for those of you who aren't, real quickly, a game jam is essentially a hackathon for games. People get together, pair up with people or team up with people who they may or may not have worked with before. and try to do a game based on some given theme, some common theme, in a given amount of time. The most common game, the biggest game jam in the world is called Global Game Jam. It happens in dozens of countries, thousands of people take part, tens of thousands of people take part, thousands of games are made. And it happens over the course of 48 straight hours in a weekend that's actually happening at the end of January. It's a very intensive, very creative, very like bonding experience, but a lot of people sleep, you know, anywhere from 0 to, some people sleep, but like a lot of people sleep from 0 to 3 or 4 hours a night is about the standard. So it's pretty intense, and your Sunday is basically, you go home and you just crash, and you're like limp back to work on Monday. So it affects people's lives in a pretty significant way. So what we started doing is a more casual, for 2 weeks, work on a jam, like at your own pace, and like 10 hours or so, a couple evenings, maybe a Sunday afternoon, and it's like something you can do and still have a normal life. But even though like maybe the scale of the games is not quite as big as you could do with 48 hours of intensive work, like caffeine-fueled work, the benefits of being able to do this more frequently are huge, and I think our community benefits a lot from them. Number one, we create these opportunities every month for you to work with people that you haven't worked with before. So you up your collaboration skills, you up your your relationships, and also you're creating a game every month, which based on some theme, given some constraint, which really challenges people's creativity, and I think allows them to kind of develop their voice and find like the kind of games they want to make. You're not always going to make the game that's your favorite type of game, but you'll discover that, and you'll learn from all of that. Let's see. So, yeah, and also just like people's skills go up. At least the skills that allow you to go from idea to something you can show your friends. And that leaves the other part of it, the kind of shipping and visibility part, that is something that I think we're like trying to work on a little more, and we've experimented with that. But before I get into that, so let me finish up how we kind of do them. So basically how we do them is we kick them off on one night. We always meet on Thursday, and whoever is doing the jam, it was a community thing, and then I started taking it over, and now Corey's helping me. So we kind of alternate, and what we do is we pick a theme. And because we do it so frequently, it's given us the ability to kind of be a little more, I think, try to be more interesting and more challenging, and address structure maybe more than content as much as a lot of game jam themes do. So a lot of game jam themes will be things like the global game jam themes have been like Ouroboros or ritual. So kind of like prompt words that make you think about the content or what your game is going to be about. And we do those, but we also have experimented with things that like play with the structure of how you make a game. So like, for example, we've done, we did a Exquisite Corpse Jam, which is like, if you're not familiar with Exquisite Corpse, it's a surrealist game where someone writes a start of a sentence on a piece of paper, hands it to someone, they continue it, and then fold up the previous thing, and you basically write a story only knowing what came first. And so our version of this was, someone starts a Unity project, does a little something, so nothing that's going to define the game, and then passes it on, and you just pass it around. That was kind of interesting, although the fault with that is that one person just didn't, and so it just stopped. It died at him. We do a Secret Santa Jam every year, which is around Christmas time. We didn't do it this year, but you draw someone else's name out of a hat, and you make a personalized game just for them as a gift to them, which is a way to kind of like get to know people, and just kind of interesting thing. We did Get Out the Jam, which is like make a field game, so make a game that you play outside during the summer. So people were playing like these made-up ball games and games with hula hoops and frisbees and running around a field, which was a lot of fun. We have an annual, actually, can I plug in real quick?
Do you want the HDMI?
Sure.
Take the talking stick, Jake.
While I'm hooking this up, the game jam that we've done 3 times, our only annual game jam, is called Iron Chef Jam. It's an analog-only jam.
If you go to twitch.tv/Ellieface, one of our local Twitch streamers actually like streamed and recorded the whole last Iron Chef Jam, which is pretty tight. People made like bows and arrows out of straws and rubber bands, and
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
there's a lot of yoga.
Is there the audio?
Oh, you've got, yeah. There's also audio.
Yeah.
My
I
mistake.
got a quick little teaser video of it.
Can you make it? No, it's,
I'm glad someone brought
There we
media.
So basically, it's an analog-only jam. It's a one-night-only jam, and it's very like real-time and like spectator-friendly. And basically, everybody gets a bag of ingredients. You have to make a game out of only those ingredients, and you get one secret ingredient that you have to use. It's been done in anywhere from an hour to 2.5 hours or so, and this is a little video about it.
Welcome to Game Stadium.
So that's just basically a little window into what it is. So I feel like I've talked for a while, so I'm just going to, I could say some more things, but I'll just show you this last thing, which is our itch page. We have all our Game Jam entries post on our itch page. So if you want to check out phillygamemechanics.itch.io, these are just a sampling of games posted from our jams of past.
Cool. So yeah, game mechanics I've always felt is like the weirdo fringe part of Philadelphia, where we have drunk people play with hula hoops and stuff. But now we have the IGDA back, thanks to the three folks and a bunch of other people. You got a whole squad. And the IGDA, is anyone here familiar with the IGDA as like a global concept? People who aren't from Philadelphia? Guys, well, the IGDA is, I'll let you guys explain it. So it's the more business end that's, helping us idiots like formulate our weird stuff into like actual consumable things for other humans, I think.
yeah, we do you want to take it?
Oh, okay. So the IGDA, it's kind of like an advocacy group for game developers, like all over the world. It's just a kind of like a international voice of the community. So the focus is like on education, professional development, and basically just networking, community, stuff like that.
Yeah, the IGDA is kind of a national organization and it has different chapters around the globe. And honestly, the different chapters, if you've gone to any of the other events in different cities, you kind of get the feel that they kind of reflect the culture of the different city. And Philadelphia is in that interesting position that Steve had mentioned, that there is no real like AAA industry here. But we do have is a lot of student developers. Like we have some of the best tech companies out there. A lot of our meetings are held over at Drexel, which has a game design program, and they're doing all kinds of things with engineering, science, and robotics, and all of that. So like, we do try to do things like professional development. Like we just did a portfolio review where people who students, artists who came over, they got professionals from the industry to actually take a look at their portfolios. And that's the kind of advocacy we want to do. We want to try and lift people up. But what's been interesting and also fun to do with Philadelphia is there's kind of this branch of, like Steve said, a lot of indie developers and a lot of homegrown. And I think a challenge for us that we're trying to push into the IGDA is because the future of game development really is the independent scene, especially if you go down to MIVs and, you know, even just look on the internet, you do kind of see that. So we want to kind of take that spirit and carry that forward rather than not just like, you know, here, polish your portfolio so you can go move to the West Coast. You know, a lot of people in Philadelphia don't want to do that. What we'd really like to do is just try to find new avenues for people in our, you know, in our city to be able to organically grow and maybe create something new and special and unique in our own interesting way. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Alex?
Yeah, I guess I'll just kind of bring it back a little into answering the question of like building communities in your own geographies. So we kind of have an interesting ecosystem in Philly because of the fact that there's no AAA studio, and I think that what allows an organization like IGDA to exist is something like Philly Game Mechanics. Years back, I don't really think, so the level of expertise that exists in Philly right now is thanks to the fact that there was this group of hobbyists who were able to teach each other, work together, form a co-working space where all these people could get together and kind of level up together to create awesome stuff like Flyclops and Final Form, PHL Collective. Like these types of companies are creating professional grade stuff, but we don't have like the marketing and the business represented in Philly because the industry isn't there. So because the ecosystem started out by people getting together, bootstrapping, being scrappy, it put us in a position where some professional organizations started to grow out of it. And what happens, and I'll get into kind of the philosophy of the structure of how people start to fall off, is that once you level up to a certain point, you're probably not going to continue coming to the hobbyist type stuff. That's what we've seen. And it's a sad reality because you eventually get so tied up. Like now that you're a full-time dev studio, your focus is like revenue. You no longer have your other salary to support your hobby. So like Jake is one of the few guys who's been able to really dedicate himself, at least as far as I've seen, to like making sure Game Mechanics has some like studio recognition behind it. But a lot of people, they unfortunately fall off, and that's because, at least from what I've seen, you get a lot of students and a lot of hobbyists asking the professional studios for jobs, and it takes focus away from what they're doing. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because if you're going to eventually go out and try to create your own communities, you just need to be aware of these scenarios happening. So maybe you can avoid some of the pitfalls that we've made. But so you start to get this drop off from the people who really built up the original community and who you really want to maintain their attendance at these events, because you want them to teach the newer students and the newer hobbyists because they've been there and they know what it takes. So the IGDA, in part, exists to try to bring people like that back into the loop and give them a professional atmosphere where they know that they can go to talk with people of their caliber, of their experience level, not of their caliber, because even hobbyists are great, and you'll see that throughout this conference. But people who have shared in their sim experiences, built their own studios from scratch. So IGDA hopes to kind of fill in the gaps in Philly. You need to have a hobbyist organization like Philly Game Mechanics and like IGDA that are working in tandem to represent everybody in that community. And the hope is that we can create IGDA can help studios create jobs for the people who are in Philly Game Mechanics and the students in the area so that we can keep jobs in Philly rather than, as Adrian said, creating portfolios and shipping out west. And at that point, hopefully when we can show off the talent that we have, we can bring in some AAA studios or even just bring in investors, which is something that we're down the line going to be trying to do, putting together an investment fund to help these independent studios get the marketing dollars that they need. Because really what separates a lot of indie games from AAA games is the marketing. The games are just as good. It's just like you need to be able to pay to get those games in front of your players. So that's kind of why IGDA exists and where we hope to go and what we're hoping to accomplish.
To me, I feel like the IGDA is actually a good entry point for the community. Like, that's how I got involved with the Philadelphia community like 10 years ago, is I didn't know anything about the community, but I knew what the IGDA was, and I knew that the IGDA had chapters all over the world, so I was like, all right, was there a Philadelphia chapter? And there was, so I started showing up, and that's how I was introduced to the rest of the community. And I think that's one of the goals of the IGDA is to connect everyone in the community, to connect game mechanics, to connect the Game Makers Guild, connect with other professional organizations, other tech organizations in Philadelphia, and basically just be like a contact point almost for those different organizations, so that someone who isn't familiar with the community can just show up at an IGDA meeting and do some networking and be introduced to all these different facets of the community.
Yeah, I think the idea that when you have a community, we think of community as this like one big whole, but really there are a lot of like splinter groups that really do like work in tandem with each other. Like again, like we were actually part of the Philadelphia IGDA community back in like 2008, 2009. And that eventually, that created like splinter groups that eventually bred into becoming the Game Mechanics and becoming the Game Makers Guild. And it's not like, oh, there's this like one central hub that binds, everyone together, like there's a leader or anything. No, they're all working, they all work, like IGDA brought people together and it bred new groups, and that's basically, it just becomes a cycle, and it's just a cycle of everybody like working together. Like again, I don't want to get like, it sounds sappy, but there is really like this like holding hands thing where everyone like recognizes their strengths and weaknesses and leans on each other to like really keep everything like going. Like I'm really proud of the work that the IGDA did back in 2008, and I'm super excited that like it grew and bore this like new thing. I'm really excited to like try and like, I'm hoping to create avenues for everybody in Philadelphia through the new IGDA, not just, like it would be great to get like investor portfolios and stuff, but even just like connecting people, like people who know the IGDA as a professional organization, getting people from New York and other places to come down and just like start those connections and build even new, greater things, I think is a really exciting proposition. I think it's something you need to think about is, working together with everybody and seeing that each one has their own strengths and weaknesses that you can all fit together.
Yeah, because it's not always like that. Because like Philly has had like a lot of rough spots as well. There's some dark times where there's like a lot of infighting between some of the groups. Because since we don't have AAA and there's not a lot of money or tax breaks coming into Philly, it's a lot of people fighting over the same developers, the same grants, the same opportunities. And there's a lot of like cutting people out at the ankle for like the same stuff. And stupid stuff, like people leveraging the fact that they got their names put into like a Polygon article to like hold over people's heads. And it's stupid. And it's really interesting to see that after 5 years, the people like that are gone, and like the hippie love community that like welcomes everybody is like still here. So that's pretty rad. And I think that's like something cool to look forward to, like continuing. Which is like something I struggle with, which is interesting that like Alex brought up the idea of like high-level people leaving, is that you like develop these skills and you start the community and it's your friends and you have a great time, and then people start showing up that you don't know, and it's like, it's been a very interesting experience learning how to be friends with every person you meet because it's exhausting. Like, being a good person to literally every stranger that comes up to you is incredibly difficult, no matter how much you want to do it. Like, some days it's just not in it. Like, you're just not there. Like, I work up until the moment I have to leave for game mechanics, because we meet on Thursdays, and that's the night that we ship our builds out. So I'm coming from, like, the most aggravating, like, horrifying game development environment, and then being like, hi, welcome, like, so nice to meet you, what do you do?
That's exactly how you sound, too.
And I sound just like that. I put on the voice, I curtsy a lot. But no, it's hard, and it's probably one of the few things I learned in college and the few things I learned afterwards is don't be a dick if you want your community to survive. So I want to ask you guys one more question, and then if any of y'all have questions, just like shout them out whenever, man. This is freeform. This is jazz. Yeah, cool. We have a microphone. I was wondering, I did not understand what the gesture was. But yeah, if you guys can tell me like real quick, like before we go to Q&A, just like one success story that's like professional and one that's like personal, like a human connection, or like a nice dog that you petted.
It's a lot to process.
One for me is Jake and I started a band briefly, and that was fun. And now I play bass, and that's cool. I'm not very good.
I think from like a personal level, it's semi-professional just because it's industry. But one of the things that I think is interesting about kind of organizational dynamics, like community dynamics, is you're always going to have like one or two people in an organization that you go to join that are like, this is the person that keeps you coming back. So for me, the first night I walked into Philly Game Mechanics, I was just starting Red Queen, and I walk in, and this dude Camden, who introduced himself as the Philly Dev Night, like game
champion.
Like the group mom.
Yeah,
that they have like the den mother, who was just like this great personable guy who made me feel welcome to be there. And by the end of the day, I was like, I'm signing up for a co-working space. I'm gonna be here Monday morning working. And it was like through just a personal connection that's how your communities will begin to thrive. There's got to be like that one person. So be that person in your community and like go up and say hi to people.
And I actually do. I have. Well, I'm going to tie both the personal and professional together and go with what Alex is saying and actually like talk about the chain, because there is a chain, right? So I had a group of really close personal friends in high school who all wanted to make games, and we saw an ad that was on like a website I actually used to write for called Games Are Fun. I don't think it's around anymore, but they did an interview with the professors at Camden County College, which was the first community college to offer game design development as a program. We all decided we were going to go. So me and my close friends all got together. We got an apartment together. We started going to Camden County College. Now, they got out of game development, and we're all still really close friends, you know, even though like I kind of went and we all went different paths, like we still were able to like stick close together. But through that program, I met Karen and I met Ryan Morrison, who was my professor at the time, who kind of like brought us all together and was like, hey, maybe we should make video games, you know, maybe we should like make video games here, since, you know, he wanted his students to have a platform, because it's hard to get to go right from school and get a job in the industry. So it's like, hey, maybe we should make games. So that's how Island Officials was born and how I started getting into DS games. And then me and Karen from there decided, hey, let's go to GDC, where we then met a good friend of ours named Branwin, who told us about the IGDA in Philadelphia at the time. And we went, and it was pretty cool. And then from there, like, we met Grant Schonkwilder, who eventually became the chair of the IGDA of Philadelphia, and we hooked him up with Ryan Morrison, and then they worked together, and then we met a lot of people from the Philadelphia community from the beginning of the IGDA, which eventually then, you know, we helped build the IGDA, which then, you know, grew big companies like Cypher Prime came out of that, and then they, like, Cypher Prime are the guys who eventually started the Philadelphia Game Forge, which then became the Game Mechanics, and I've just kind of like watched it all grow organically. And even though I don't know if I've necessarily been a giant voice in the community, I've always been there, and I've been making the connections and connecting people with other people. So it's really about this chain, right? Like, and always never splintering from that chain. Like, if you want to see a community grow, you always have to stick with it, and that can be challenging, especially like people who eventually get like full-time jobs and things. That's what we've seen. The people who a lot of the people from our community who got like big companies and such don't have the time, and I don't blame them for that. Like, that's not like a bad thing. It becomes hard, but if you like stick with it, like, and help be that chain that connects people together, it's just going to help your community thrive more. So I think that chain of command is also really important to think about.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't have too much different to say, but I feel like the past 10 or 11 years of my life, it's even hard to separate the personal and the professional because they're so intertwined. I mean, as far as my game development career goes, I mean, when you're doing it like indie development, it kind of becomes your entire life. So I feel like all my friends basically came out of the community. And all the opportunities that I've had, it's all tied together.
One that strikes me is a guy who runs an organization called Focused Athletics that originally was providing extracurricular athletic support to economically disadvantaged high school students, but his scope kind of grew the more he saw them needing things. He started doing more and more stuff, from academic support to having this whole library of lender suits in his basement that he lends out for like job interviews and college application interviews and stuff like that. He randomly came to a Game Mechanics with some of the kids, and they were who were interested in games and maybe flirting with the idea of doing game development as careers. They played some. It was a game jam showcase night. They played a bunch of the games that we had made, which was cool to see. To play a game that they enjoyed with the person who made it in a couple weeks, standing right there to make that connection, and started talking to this guy and just started a very informal email, like, mentorship is a very strong word, but like advising thing with a couple of the kids who I just pointed them in the right direction. I pointed them some technology and stuff, and they went from barking up very much the wrong tree, like learning HTML on like the library computer, to playing with simple game engines, and now one of them is getting a computer subsidized and is like leaving high school, so that was pretty cool. And I think that's just possible because Game Mechanics is such a very loose organization. It's completely open to anyone. We're not like, this is for game developers. We're open to aspiring game developers or people who even just like playing games. And sometimes that makes for kind of a sprawling community, but in other times it brings in very like interesting, diverse people from the community who like you can just make really cool, interesting connections with from all perspectives.
Cool. Do you guys have any questions? I guess I made that confusing before. Sorry about that. But yeah, if you guys have questions, raise your hand and just shout them at me. Let's go. Denim Jacket, my man.
Okay, so I have a question about a hypothetical situation that may or may not exist in the future. Bear with me. So I'm running something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, which is a game development and sort of game jam thing or tabletop in the game store I work at. Let's say that a couple of people sit down and make a game together. A couple of them want to publish this game or like actually make it. How do you navigate the ownership of ideas? That is what I'm most afraid of.
So I think the way we've always done it, because we do have like a lot of games that have come out of game jams that have gone on to like be sold in Barnes and Noble and Steam and stuff. We had a jam that was about selling games. And we've always given 100% ownership to the developer. Like, we don't even ask people to like name drop us. Like, it's just we provide them space to do their thing.
Or are you asking more like how the partners in that game development like divvy up the?
Like, what's the best practice?
Yeah.
How you can help them navigate it? Do I let them figure it out?
That's a really tough question. I mean, generally what I say to people is don't worry about it until it's a thing, but that. Because most likely it's, it takes a lot of work to get something off the ground, and if you do a lot of that worrying up front, it's just wasted. But the downside of that, if something does happen and you haven't worked it out, then it's just, I don't.
Also, be lucky enough to start having lawyers show up to your game dev meetups, because we had like 2 lawyers for a while, and one of my buddies does like copyright law, and he was just like, yeah, I can help them if they want.
So there's a lot of resources that you can find online, not game related, but just generally how to divvy up equity in a business. And a lot of these are going to come up with a lot of the same scenarios and things that a person has to do in a business that you're going to have to perform within your game business. So it's not just about conceptualizing a game. It's about who's doing the marketing, who's talking to potential investors, who's taking care of the logistics, printing out, games, who's fronting the money to create your assets, stuff like that. So like, there's so much more to it in divvying equity than just like, whose idea was it? Like us 5 people at this table. So I think that when you get down I'd probably hold off on having those kinds of discussions until you get to the point, as Jake said, where a lot of these other business processes are coming into place, and then you're really going to see who's going to stick around to go through all that tough shit.
Because you don't want to cripple the creativity or getting the project off the ground. Like, that's kind of what I think.
I also think that people who want to have those conversations up front are the types of people who don't understand the teamwork that's required to ship a game. Because if you're so worried about your equity on day one, you're probably not thinking about the team. You're just thinking about yourself.
Also, those are good problems.
Yeah, what's up, Green? Yeah.
The way you describe this DIY community reminded me a lot of a music DIY community that I was in. And that was fun, and everyone was having fun, but then it eventually died because some people without much skill started entering. They were totally nice. Nobody wanted to kick them out because they were nice and good people, but they just didn't have the skill, and some people stopped coming to shows, and the community died. Have you guys had to deal with just bad seeds or people without skill who have kind of salted the waters?
We've really recently tried to crack down on a different kind of that, like bad seeds as in like community bad seeds, like people we felt that are like harmful to the people in our community and like the possible diversity of our community. I don't think we've ever had a problem where like someone's skill level has like ruined anything for anybody. Usually, I think just because like, at least for game mechanics, like we're so open to educating people who are new to this field, and that's kind of like one of our big tent poles, that like you come to us with no expectations and we will meet you with no expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I don't think it's ever been a problem. Usually, some people like don't come back because they think they can't hack it, and that's a real bummer.
Yeah, we're not.
Yeah, what's up? Yeah, that or everybody in Philadelphia is a shredder. Like, I don't know. Maybe we're just all very good.
I think that having a code of conduct early on is really important. It was very important for the IGDA because we had somebody that right off the bat we needed to point to the code of conduct and say, here's why what you did is wrong. And if we didn't have the code of conduct, it would have been an issue. And I think these guys went through something like that, so I know they'd agree. But you also have to have a person, maybe it's your chair, who if there's somebody who's not a fit, and that can be cultural, and that's tough to deal with because you can't point to the code of conduct and say, you're not a good enough musician to be part of it. But you need to have some way or some person who you're going to be like, okay, you have to talk to them. And I'm not saying kick them out, but talk to them to establish some kind of ground rules for how they interact with the community. And that person, they have a tough job because they have to have a conversation that nobody wants to have. But I think that having a person like that in your organization is an asset to the community.
Yeah, as long as you feel safe and comfortable approaching people, like, again, it sounds like your situation is very different from like what we've had to, with the game mechanics and with IGDA, but that being said, within your situation, I think it applies to any community, even like a job or a professional setting, firing early, it's a term and it is a thing and it's uncomfortable, but it's better to have an uncomfortable conversation as soon as possible rather than let it languish and become not just more uncomfortable, but also toxic. Because the longer you let things linger, the more toxic they become, and then that can endanger the entire community.
And the earlier you are in establishing a community, the more important that is. Because if somebody who's a bad cultural fit has their hand in creating a community, that community is going to be toxic right out of the gate. So you got to identify how to deal with that early on.
And don't fire people who are bad at guitar. Just give them a bass. It's a lot easier. There's less strings. You mostly just play G. It's fine. Other questions? Yeah, what's up?
Hey, I don't know if this makes sense, but can you think of one thing that may be obvious, not so obvious, that prevents someone from being successful in this industry? What have you experienced that really made your focus? Hey, maybe, I don't know, something that make or break you?
As far as just game development industry, is that what you mean?
Being the idea guy.
Yeah.
Everybody shows up and is like, man, I got great ideas for games. I'm like, cool, Unity's free. Like, you can try it, man. I'll help you, but I'm not doing it.
Yeah, being the idea guy, being the person who gives up too easily or doesn't take criticism well. Like, I think that's the number one issue, and it kind of feeds back into what we were talking about earlier with firing early, is that you have to be the kind of person who will listen and understand what people are saying and not become immediately defensive as soon as I think that kind of feeds back into the idea guy too, is that the idea guy is usually very critical of the idea of what do you mean I can't just have this great idea and then someone's not going to give me a pile of money. Like, I've seen it a lot of times, especially coming from the educational background. Starting in building communities started back in Camden County College, and those were the people who did not move forward, were the people who just kind of assumed that things were a certain way and they would not hear it any other way.
And you also just have to be willing to put in the work, and not everyone is. And I mean, it kind of goes back to the idea guy. Like, the idea guy wants to have the idea and get the credit for it, but they don't want to put in the work. So, yeah.
Steve gave rule number 1, in my opinion. Don't be a dick. It's a very small industry. Like, everybody knows each other. And it's really easy to make connections because people in the game dev community, they're willing to talk. They're not like sitting at the top of their ivory towers for the most part, unless they're like EA. But like, you can talk to people at all levels in many different companies. But if you start burning bridges and like acting like an asshole or naysaying or trashing other people's ideas left and right, you're going to run out of bridges really quickly.
Yeah, what's up in the back? Not quite that specific. Maybe not the emotional breakdown part, but I've met a lot of people who are like the one step past idea guy, who are like, it's like I'll talk to just a lot of people who are like, I don't know how to program, and I guess I'm unwilling to learn, and then they get stuck there, but they're like, I really want to like make this thing exist in the world, and usually the first thing I tell them is to come to a game jam and just like start building skills. But the other thing that I learned this year, I'm gonna name drop YouTube's Brental Floss, who is like, hey, I don't know anything about making a game, but he'd made a game last year, and like the one skill he did have that is like the only thing he ever talks to me about now is he knows After Effects. So he wanted to make this like trivia comedy game, and he knew After Effects, so he could animate and mock up what the game was going to look like. And then, because he's a YouTube person with money, he could pay somebody to do the programming. But he could like envision and pitch a game with that was more than just an idea. Like he had a proof of concept in something that he did know and could push through that barrier with the skill set he had. And then that kind of gave him a head of steam to start actually learning how to do stuff. And I think that's like the best way, because like an emotional breakdown's not like very helpful. Might be like cathartic and fun if you like break stuff.
Well, I will, as someone who has been prone to emotional breakdowns in the past, I will I do want to I not necessarily disagree, but I think there is a difference. Like I've never seen an idea guy have emotional breakdown. Usually the people I've seen have an emotional breakdown, like me, it's because they've reached a breaking point that they didn't expect to find. They've hit a wall, and like it's challenging and it's hard, but usually it's kind of like that metamorphosis period where eventually, you wipe the tears aside and you're just like, all right, pick yourself up, figure this out, and then you go back to it. Like, I spent the last, I don't know how many years of my career not even, not knowing how to program, and this past year, there's one of the games in the Phillytron you'll play, it was my first game that I coded from the ground up, because I had to become self-sufficient. I had to reach that breaking point. So I don't think emotional vulnerability is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there are different types of mental breakdowns, don't get me wrong. Some of them are a little bit more toxic, but sometimes, yeah, it actually is a good sign, and sometimes you do have to break that threshold and realize you're out of your comfort zone to be able to keep moving forward.
I think the perfect recipe for a mental breakdown is working on a game for 2 years, shipping it, and not selling it. So I think that, the game jams are a great opportunity to do some rapid prototyping and just ship a game, just ship tons of games, right? Increase your level of expertise so that when you do work on a game, your magnum opus, it's not your first game you've ever shipped. So I think that that's why organizations like PGM are so critical. It forces people to just learn how to produce games quickly and level up quickly.
Yeah, honestly, I don't blame people who have emotional breakdowns doing that, because learning how to make games is hard, but what's really hard is supporting yourself through the time it takes to learn how to make a game, then make a game, then sell a game and ship a game, and it's not easy. If you're working another job, you have to scrap the time together. If you're not working another job, you have to live in, your parents' basement or something. There's if you're getting started, there's short of getting a job, which we don't see a lot of in Philly because we don't have the industry. We see people just bootstrapping and scraping, and that's mostly the stories. And yeah, there's a lot of burnout, I think, because it's very difficult financially, almost more than just way more, I think, than just the challenges of learning how to do it.
Also, the beauty of an indie game development community is you have a shoulder to cry on, or 40 shoulders to cry, just a little bit on each of them.
It's like a big self-help community.
Yeah. I think that answered the question. I don't know. You good? Are you good? Or was it your emotional breakdown? I don't want to put you on the spot, but we can talk. I'm here for you. Other questions about game development, being an indie, Philadelphia, where to get the best cheesesteak?
Time for one more, I think.
The answer is Jim's. I say Jim's or D'Alessandro's.
Dude, same too.
Yeah, they're the best.
Yeah.
Pat's and Gino's can go suck an egg.
Nobody else needs to.
Nobody else has
weigh in,
opinions.
that's the answer.
I guess. Cool.
That's
if there's no more, yeah, what's up? Oh, word.
There's actually quite a few board gaming meetups. There's Boards and Beers or something. If you go on actual meetup and look for board games, I've been to a couple of them. There's also was it Red Cap's Corner?
Yeah.
I'm blanking. Yeah. They upstairs at Red Cap's Corner, which is in West Philly, has games all the time.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Nerd Street Gamers. They do like a retro game night, I think once a week.
Yeah, that group also has a lot of like competitive Overwatch and Counter-Strike teams and whatever, if that's up your alley at all.
Also, Philly Game Mechanics, we play games.
We play games all the time.
We like that's definitely part of our thing. We make games and we play games.
Come play Nintendo Switch with me.
Yeah,
Like
we have.
Towerfall.
We have tournaments. Yeah, we play a fair number of games, and you can play games, the jam games.
The 18th is a work and play event. Is a work and play night, right?
Right.
Yeah. So work and play, January 18th at Indy Hall. We mostly just hang out and play games, but sometimes we're working on games too.
Cool. What's up?
I more just wanted to add to her question in that I know the Game Makers Guild does their playtest session. They do suburban ones every month.
Once a month?
I think, do they alternate weeks?
I don't know, but Nicole, who runs the Game Makers Guild, is doing a panel discussion on the importance of playtesting later this week. So look that up in the MAGFest guidebook.
Yeah. Yeah, because then you can play other people's indie games. It'll be fun.
Yeah, Philadelphia is everywhere. Walk around MAGFest and find a Philadelphian.
I'm sure there will be people in the board game.
Yeah, definitely there. Continue show. They're from Philly. They're cool. Paul's cool anyway. I don't know about the other two. Cool. I think that's us. I think that's it. Yeah? Cool.
Can I do
Sure.
a quick plug? Quick plug.
Quick plug.
Okay, so my company, Red Queen, we're launching our platform right now that helps people create these web apps that help players get better at their games, have better game experiences. One of these elements is an SDK that makes it easier to create those web apps. We're looking for one or two people who have like JavaScript and maybe React Redux experience who are interested in making tools. It's kind of like modding, but it's to help improve the game experience, not like change physical attributes of a game. We are giving a stipend for the person's first tool or so. So if anybody's interested, come talk to me after this is over. It's a cool opportunity.
Yeah, cool. And go to phillygame-mechanics.itch.io. We've got like 100 gam jams that you can go jam a gam. Check out the Phillytron in the Death by Audio arcade downstairs, and they're like, everyone here is from Philadelphia. You're all now Philadelphians. So I deputize you. Later.
Thank you.